Howdy, comrades, and welcome back to the Marxist Space Pod. I'm James, your favorite host and revolutionary, and this week we'll be discussing elements of democracy and leftist interpretations of democratic policies. Remember that if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can get in touch with us through our email at marxistspacepod@gmail.com. All one word, no capitals. This episode is just Nick and I. Seth is having some technical difficulties, but I think we had some good conversations nonetheless. Without further ado, let's get into the discussion. Alright, so let's open up on democracy and society, like how, why is it necessary? Why would you say, so like I've watched some videos lately. I've been watching, I think it was NonCompete on YouTube, and he's been talking about democratic structures under anarchy. He's an anarcho-communist, and he has a lot of great resources for anyone who's interested in, anarchy and anarcho-communism in general. I've also been watching some of the, I guess you could say, the opposition to our points of view, and there are some people that would argue against the necessity of democracy. There are some people that believe that everyone's always going to have competing views. There are people who say that democracy kind of just leads you in circles because of reactionism, like the right's going to gain power, and then the left will rise up and seize power, and then the right will rise up and seize power, and so on and so forth. They claim it's kind of a giant circle. So my question to you would be, do you think democracy is necessary, and why?
Yeah, so I think that state affairs should always be, at least at some level, whether it's during wartime, during peacetime, regardless of the situation. I think that state affairs should be, to some extent, a public matter. But I think so. That's the first thing I believe. But also, I think that the sort of the level or directness or amount of integrated participation in democracy, that is more dependent on maybe like what kind of geopolitical internal situation or internal situation a society is subjected to or at the mercy of, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's like the stage of the revolution in that country, or it threats from the outside. So like if a country's sovereignty is threatened by a powerful neighbor or an imperialist power, then maybe it is necessary for the central government to be a little bit stronger. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I would generally agree, and like personally, I have faith in a sense in anarchy, and I think it could be completely valid. I know there are a lot of people like on the left and the right that are totally against that idea, but like most people, when they think of anarchy, they think of like zero governance at all. They don't think there's anyone in charge, or they don't think anyone's, they think everyone's just doing what they want to do, and that's the end of it. But it's not. Most forms of anarchy they rely on democracy and like governance through contract. And so I think democracy is absolutely necessary in a society. I've been watching a lot of resources. I won't throw any names out there because I don't want to have anyone draw attention to me saying something about it. But I absolutely don't agree with anybody's stance that they say that democracy is completely unnecessary, because if you don't have the right to self-govern a little bit, like even in America, as much as, despite all the gripes I have about the system, I don't think that, I think that we are fairly free here, as opposed to like the old monarchies, like whenever there were totalitarian states, for example. Like there are cases where people were drawn and quartered simply for speaking out against monarchies, and I don't think that any state should have, total control over its citizens. So I think at least some leeway in the ability to, vote on laws and how you're governed is necessary. And granted, the drawing and quartering thing, that's an extreme example, I know, and there's not a lot of states around that still do shit like that, but I have faith in the idea that people can govern themselves. They might not always make decisions that I'd agree with, but I think that the more democracy, the better. And yeah, I think that basically sums it up. But I do think that it's necessary to have a state that can enforce the democracy, as contradictory as it sounds. Kind of like the dictatorship of the proletariat sounds contradictory at first.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, wait. So hold on, 2 points. So like, the first one is on anarchy. I think, actually, like, humanity, as in terms of like just like the people, in terms of our, our personalities, in terms. I think I think we're already, everybody, or maybe not, but like society is in general, in terms of like when only looking at people, is technically ready for anarchism or like a stateless society. But what isn't, the reason I'm not an anarchist is because I don't think our productive facilities are ready for a stateless society.
Right.
That's my thing on the whole matter. But yeah, on the, what was my point? On the, oh yeah, so like you said, like a state having total control over something. I think that a state having total control over a society can be valid if the state is one in which the people, have a say, if that makes sense.
Right, but that's what I was saying initially, is that there shouldn't, like, I guess
Yeah.
I was talking more like we were talking a second ago about, like, the last topic on our list of things to cover is Unitarianism and monarchy. I was saying more like the state shouldn't, like, that's okay. I'm totally fine. That's what I was saying. It should be like the maximum, like a dictatorship of the proletariat, where it's an actual dictatorship and everyone has to abide by these laws, kind of like the USSR at its strictest point, where it's like the laws were strictly enforced. That should be like as tough as it gets. It shouldn't be like where there's zero freedom of speech or anything. It shouldn't be like Louis XIV's France. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be one person is the state, or where only the monarch or a parliament has say over what's good for the workers. I think that there should be democracy, at least on the lowest level. So that kind of does lead us into vanguardism, the like having a parliament that mainly consists of the ruling party. I think it is. I think there is some relevance to it, because it can be kind of like, we're gonna do things our way for a while and like slowly shift to a more democratic system as people see more and more that our way works. And if it doesn't, then there's gonna be problems. But like, for example, the Vanguard Party in Russia and in the current ruling party in China. In China, the party became the state. So after the revolution, there are, I think, 9 political parties, major political parties in China, and a couple of minor ones. But in order to be part of the government, you have to be part of the Communist Party. So you have to leave your political party, and then it's kind of, you have to change it from the inside out. Kind of a more rigid version of America's system of government. But which is, I think it's kind of valid, because it does kind of remove the partisan arguments. Like, there's no real element of, we're going to disagree with you because you're of a different party. There's one massive party that's kind of, it's the Vanguard Party. It is leading the way, and everyone else can tweak something based on, their opposition, or I don't know, or their difference in views on the Vanguard Party's methods.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to reduce lesser evilism in politics.
Right.
Right. Like, oh, like, I don't actually like Hillary Clinton, but Donald Trump is worse, so I'm gonna vote for Hillary Clinton. That sort of thing.
Right. So just as a brief aside, can I just say that America's two-party system, like, I know it's not like a legally mandated two-party system, but I mean, like, the fact that people aren't like trying to break it up or like try and vote for minor parties is the dumbest shit in the world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's causing issues, and I'm amazed when people can't see it. Anyway.
Or people who get like annoyed, like who blame the election of Donald Trump on like people who voted for Jill Stein.
Right.
Like, as if, like, no, don't blame those people. Blame, I don't know, the Republicans.
Yeah, of the people who just wanted to see their person in charge.
Or I don't know, maybe even blame Hillary Clinton for having a very anti-worker platform, you know,
Right, or
or maybe not her platform. I mean, Donald Trump's platform is technically more anti-worker than Hillary. I mean, they both suck, but like in terms of like who are you like trying to appeal to, if that makes sense.
right. Or maybe like even the Democrats, and this is getting like a little like into the. I mean, I guess we're using the 2016 election to like validate what we're saying, but it's like like people who wouldn't vote for Bernie. Like I'm talking like specifically like the structure of the DNC. There are super delegates who basically follow the money no matter what. If you watch their behavior,
Yeah.
they'll follow whoever can earn them the best money. It's all the worst parts of the Republican Party. But in the Republican Party, everyone's voting for the money. In the Democratic Party, there are just these big, powerful people that then vote for the money. And they're basically vote. You can blame the DNC, the Democrats, for not putting forward Bernie, because I know so many people that would have voted for Bernie instead of Trump, simply because and this goes back to the lesser of two evils thing, where he was neither Hillary nor was he Trump. Anyway, this is getting like I'm getting too off topic, but there are lots of other ways that they like if we weren't so hitched to the two primary parties, which are kind of our vanguard parties if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because what's the first thing that a president does? They clear house in the White House and replace them with all of their staffers. But yeah, so vanguardism. Let's steer back to it.
Yeah.
It's valid because it allows kind of an adjustment period
Mhm.
while you're settling into a new administration, and it does kind of allow, especially from a revolutionary standpoint, it allows the revolution to stay on track as much as possible. Rip the USSR in 1991, but it allows you to keep some control while you're transitioning away from capitalism, and I think that makes a vanguard party totally valid. Sorry, I ran.
Yeah. There are definitely I mean, there are certainly issues with vanguardism. Like, for example, you hear some people say, but it's prone to revisionism and stuff. And basically, what I would say to that is, number one, I know a lot of my leftist friends call me revisionist, but I think that I think Marxists kind of they make revisionism more of a issue than it is.
Right.
I mean, here, and they say like revision the USSR. I mean, there were certainly revisionist elements of the USSR, but really it was less revisionism and more like shitty economic policy.
Right.
And shitty economic policy, I'm sorry, is usually it's almost never revisionism. I mean, like where does Marx or Lenin write that like about like the nitty-gritty? I mean, actually Lenin writes about this a little bit now that I think of it. But when does Marx write about the nitty-gritty of centralized economic planning, right? Like where I don't know, I've never seen anything. If you could find something, and also, one more thing. I'm sorry, one more thing. Another thing is that's really, really rich coming from leftists who sort of oftentimes they'll like reject big socialist states and they choose to uphold like I don't know, like what do you call it, like communities that have lasted like a year or something.
Yeah, like Kerala, is that what you're talking? Or you're talking to like more like the anarcho-syndicalists in Spain, or
things like that.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, I mean the Catalonia thing, I mean it's a real shame, and it showed, and it's a real like really like it's a good example of what's possible. But do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. It's I understand what you're trying to say. Hey guys, James here. Sorry for jumping in the middle of the podcast, but I decided to cut out what I said here and clarify, because I like the point I made, just not how I said it. Once I'm done here, I'll cut right back to Nick's response. Basically, what I said was entirely in agreement with what Nick had said, but I added that to an extent. There's no such thing as a socialist state that isn't revisionist. The revolution will change based on people's needs. Now, denying history, that's a different story. But to change the game based on what people in your community need, well, that's kind of the point of Marxism to begin with. And that's just my opinion. Now, here's Nick.
The thing is, by revisionism, I really only mean like revision to like the original like theory of Marx or Engels or whatever, right? And really in this, like, I'm thinking people usually cite Khrushchev as the first like Soviet revisionist who had like considerable power. And I'd have to read a little bit more about the policy of everybody, but I would probably tend to agree. But the thing is, if you look at it, his point of revision was that basically class struggle in the USSR had ended, and that there was no need for, sort of suppression of bourgeois elements. And also he like he said like, oh yeah, we're going to reach communism in 20 years, guys. Yeah. And that's what it was. And in fact, but if you look at the USSR under Khrushchev, it was actually very, very similar. I mean, there was the de-Stalinization, but it was actually very similar to the USSR under Stalin in terms of like how the economy ran, and then there were the Costigan reforms eventually, but the USSR was like, it did thrive under Khrushchev. I mean, that was for the most part. So I'm just like, my thing is like, I think people, especially like Marxists, tend to look at revision like the wrong way. I think, and they're too quick to denounce things as revisionism. Right. Like, I don't want to go too deep into this. We talked about China already, but like, yeah.
Yeah. The thing I see a lot now is people, so like left comms are kind of like, I see a lot of finger pointing, and I see a lot of left comms calling people revisionist, but then I also see other people like namely MLs, like you said, pointing at left comms and calling them revisionist. I really like, I don't know, like, I guess the whole point to take away from this is, are we still really talking about the Vanguard Party?
No, that's fine. I think this is good.
Okay. But I think like you said, revisionism is a natural product of pursuing leftism. Like, not everyone's gonna really agree with everybody. I don't know. I can't.
Well, also, like, nothing's gonna be perfect, and that's literally like, if you were a true armchair left communist, you would realize that everything is going to the dialectic is going to work out. Yeah. This is what you have. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah, like
if you hate it so much, dude, like start your own revolution. Get out of the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think okay, so this is how I think I'd want to word it. The further along towards the true revolution we get, the further towards communism as we get. If we're functioning like in a, how do you say this, in like socialism in one state, I think the further towards like a true communist state you get, the more revisionist it's going to appear, especially to like old school leftists or like hardcore Marxist Leninists or left comms or social democrats. I think eventually it is going to look more and more revisionist to people who kind of don't have room to incorporate others' vision into theirs. And I think those are the more authoritarian people. I don't know. I'm going to cut it right before that last sentence, but
it's really mostly, I found that the other than like maybe left comms, it's like usually the MLMs, the Marxist-Leninist Maoists.
Yeah.
Not even like the Marxist, like it's the MLMs who are generally like the most like quick to point to anything as a revision, right? Like they even consider Castro as to be a revisionist, and because he was aligned with Khrushchev,
Yeah.
And in a sense, actually, he wasn't like he was only. I mean, they're right in the sense that like he was only a Marxist because of Che Guevara. Fun fact.
Really?
Yeah. If you, he would have just been like it would have still been awesome because like national liberation and all that, right?
Yeah.
And Batista is trash, but he was only a Marxist because, Che was one of these revolutionaries, and he, sort of in his retinue, and having a lot of conversations with this man, he was converted. He was radicalized.
That's actually freaking awesome. I didn't know that. And is it
Mhm.
true? Since we're talking about this real quick, is it true that that Che Guevara called himself a Stalinist?
Oh no, Che was yeah, Che was like he even said that like he was I mean he was kind of one of these guys who like when he started like writing or getting really like excited about something, he would like get a little carried away.
Ah,
You know, so
okay.
some like he I mean I know he so like he there was like a whole thing that he wrote about how like I I came to communism because of Daddy Stalin. He referred to Stalin as Daddy Stalin.
Yeah, I saw something. That's why I asked because I saw a post that said that he was a self-proclaimed Stalinist and
Oh
called
yeah, no, he
Stalin
was
his daddy or
and
Papa or
he
something.
yeah, yeah, Daddy Stalin, and he when he visited the USSR after the de-Stalinization against all of the recommendations because as I said, Khrushchev carried out the de-Stalinization and it would have maybe looked, you know, you're trying to like look good for Khrushchev, right?
All right.
He paid his respects to Stalin and like he brought flowers and everything.
Jeez.
He was total no, he was like, and he's one of my favorite quotes of all time is, let me see if I can remember this. I have sworn before a framed picture of my bemoaned comrade Stalin that I will not rest until I've seen these capitalist octopuses annihilated. Yeah, that's Che. I mean, he was really real cool dude, but he was one of these guys who got like super carried away when he got into like, you know, probably like a conversation or something or like a, you know, he was a character.
Yeah.
He was a real character.
Very passionate person and had what a poet. These capitalist octopuses. Is that in Latin America? Is that an insult to call someone an octopus?
I don't know. They eat octopus more in Latin America than they do in the United States. That's for sure.
Okay.
But also like it's I don't know. I feel like that's the wrong like. I mean I don't know. Maybe it is because like capitalists are like octopuses are very intelligent, but like
So it's too much of a compliment to really call a
no,
capitalist.
but like a capitalist like as in like somebody who actually owns some means of production. Like they're like clever, but like in a bad way. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah.
Like sneaky little snake, little rat, you know. So I think maybe that's fair. I was thinking like, oh, that's not nice because that octopus is actually really cool and smart. But I was thinking, oh wait, I see where you know.
Yeah. Okay, so the USSR's democracy was it perfect?
Uh-huh.
No. Is the Chinese democracy a real democracy? That's up for debate. But what about like tiered democracy? Do you think that at all works out, or do you think it's oppressive or like slow to change? So like Vietnam and China have a similar system where it is democratic but only at the lowest level, so you can vote at like a municipal or a state level. Um, so you can vote who immediately governs you, but you don't get to elect who governs them. Do you think that that's at all fair, or do you think that that misrepresents the people?
It's I don't know. For me, it's not like totally ideal, but like here's the thing. I think also though I don't think we should like because it's still like to some level like there it's still like a democratic institution and really in some ways it's also vanguardism expressed at a you know sort of maybe like a higher level
Yeah.
than before. But another thing is I don't want to come across the wrong way when I say this, and I'm gonna just like full disclosure, I am like ethnically I am of East Asian descent. I do think that it's sort of a product of the culture over there a little bit. I think I feel like that's maybe not the whole story, but a significant part of why that exists in those two states. I don't know. What do they have in Laos, by the way?
Laos? I don't know. That's one for.
I need to learn. I'm gonna learn about that one of these days. I'm gonna just spend a day reading about that country. Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely agree that they China and uh, Korea and like East Asia in general, their cultures have always had like a fetish for big government and strong bureaucracy. That's absolutely true, and that's something I was talking to a relative of mine who lives in China, and that was something that she said. Like it's always been that way. We kind of like it that way, and just a side note too, to people who say that there's like no freedom of speech or political freedom in China, yeah, there freaking is. Oh my God, we me and some family members sat down and we had like a loud drunken conversation about politics in the middle of a restaurant in China. There's no real limits on freedom of speech over there, except there's a massive censorship. Yes, that's true.
Mhm.
But China has this. Xi Jinping has a controversial stance on sovereignty, but that's a totally different thing. Anyway, but, East Asia has always had a fetish for big government, and so I think you're absolutely right whenever you say that there's it's kind of part of the culture.
Yeah.
Because if you go all the way back to Confucius had like this.
Yeah, Confucianism.
Yeah, he said he's famous for saying like the government that governs best governs least, but at the same time he advocates for large government, and he set the framework for the bureaucracies that would found um, the Ming and Qing dynasties. His teachings basically shaped that entire region, and so like if you want to learn about Chinese and East Asian government structures, go read Confucius because they're still using his works. I think Jinping actually at one point called him a communist thinker, but I could be wrong there. Don't quote me on it.
Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't know that.
But yeah. By the way, I just looked up Laos and it says it's a socialist republic.
Well, I know it's like, I know that I don't know. I just know that it's like, I know that it's a state in which the ruling party is the Communist Party. That's all I know about it. And that it's culturally similar to like Thailand, I guess, and that they have a cool blue lake where tourists go. They have like where you can see a lot of fish and stuff. I don't know. I need to learn about that country.
Yeah, I'm just glancing at the Wikipedia page, and it is interesting. Like, yeah, they've got some stuff going on. Anyway, so the verdict on the USSR and the Chinese democratic systems, they're valid. And again, I think the entire first half of this podcast or this episode's discussion, I think the moral here is revisionism is going to be inherent no matter what. Even if you have like this orthodox Marxist state, change is necessary. If you're completely rigid, then you're just going to cause more problems than you're going to solve.
Even anarchist. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt. Even certain anarchist territories have had elements of like serious revisionism.
Right.
Like Macno. I hate Macno so much sometimes. But anyway, keep going. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. It's that like no matter what, you can't create like a purely capitalist state as much as the freaking neo-reactionaries hate to hear that settle out. You can't have a purely socialist state at first, especially not with how ingrained capitalism is in our society. We need to wean ourselves off of currency. Everyone's circumstances are different. Certain cultures will be more willing to accept the revolution than others, and even then there's a spectrum within those populations of how willing people are to change their lifestyle for a new system. And I think China favors a large government. Russia had a large government immediately before it, so people are more it's more palatable to post-monarchy revolutions like Spain and Russia.
This is true.
Yeah, and I think in different situations it's going to it's just different situations yield different results. So I think that's the moral for the first half. The next thing, and I think we'll get some really good conversation about this because we were talking about it at the end of last episode, ethnicity-based government. Okay, so like the Soviets under the Soviet system, there's places like the Soviet Republic of Ukraine, which was like the Ukrainians had the ability to rule themselves, and that was largely that decision was based on like ethnic territory. Because before Russia conquered those territories, there were several nations there, and under the Soviets they got their own territory, and it's the same with the Polish, and same with the Cossacks and the like the Georgian territories. There's an element of ethnic self-government that we don't really see in China so much. Not going to say anything about Tibet here. but I think that is it valid? Yes, I think that ethnic government is. So let's take this and put this in the situation of the U.S. Do you think that there should be, um, say, the revolution took place overnight in the U.S.? Do you
Mhm.
think that there should be like a black belt socialist state, and do you think that should be part of a greater socialist state, or should that be more removed? Should it be more like, should we keep the state system we have now and just change the democratic structure?
First of all,
Mm-hmm.
we should abolish anything that calls itself like an institution from the United States. The United States, I don't want that to be a thing. Abolish that. Like, I'm not, and by that I'm not saying that we should abolish the idea of having a central government that would govern the entire territory. That's like the former United States, if necessary. But as far as so here's the thing. So like, especially in a country like this, where I think, okay, so I don't want to go full Jay Sakai settlers here, but the fact is, the white proletariat in this country does not actually have that much revolutionary potential, and the black workers here in this country do have a lot of revolutionary potential, and this is a people that, if you look at the historical situation and how that community has been utterly fucked over. I mean, I think it's the understatement of the century to say that they deserve self-determination
Right,
in
absolutely.
whatever form that may be. Like, I don't know, honestly, like whatever, the if there's like a sort of pan-African, like new African, like sort of uh revolutionary sort of movement here. I don't know. If and in an ideal situation, you know, it would be up to the leaders of that movement to decide what black self-determination looks like, whether it's integration in a larger socialist, I don't know, state or union or confederation, or just complete autonomy,
Right.
or maybe even just like separate municipal areas where there's like self-determination. I don't know. I'm not a part of that community, so I don't really feel like I should be speaking for them in that way. I mean, that's up to them, you know.
Right.
And then there's also the indigenous question, and unfortunately, a lot of them have been killed off because of the it's pretty horrible, the whole colonization thing.
Right.
But I do think that efforts should be made to allow them to also have self-determination, the ones that are left, like the Navajo Nation, for example.
Right.
I don't know anything about Lakota Republic, that whole thing, but if that's like, honestly, like, I would be totally in favor of having a similar sort of situation with them. And I do think that there would maybe is less revolutionary potential among those communities than there is the black community, but I still think that there's certainly more revolutionary potential among those communities in this country than you know than that of the white proletariat.
Right.
And also, like, there's another thing about like Chicano nationalism and stuff. I know some Chicano Maoists who talk about that kind of thing, but
Right.
you know,
I'm prone to agree with you that the that white Americans have less motivation to participate in the revolution than black Americans do. There's obvious um, the gaps in advantage. The wage gap alone is reason enough for a white person to favor um, the current system, the current heavily embedded system, as opposed to a more worker-oriented system. And
Mhm.
I definitely think that ethnic division is something that I hate to word it like this, but could be exploited by a potential revolutionary class. Um, but I still think so. Last time we talked about this, you said that the point that you argued was self governance and what's the term? Hold up, we were just using it a second ago. Self-determination. Holy shit, I can't believe I forgot that for a second. But my thoughts on it is at this point, using just America as an example, Black Americans are, if you ask any of them, basically 95% of the time they'll tell you they're Americans. They're not really African anymore. They're African American. And this is something that I've brought up before, and like I've talked to my friends about, and this is the universal response that I get from people from a bunch of different backgrounds, and the response varies from person to person. They all have their reasons and explanations.
Wait, are you just like asking people like, do you?
No. So like an example is like for like in high school, right after there's a natural disaster and everything, and at the same time as in the place there was a natural disaster in the place that I grew up in. At the same time, there's a natural disaster somewhere else in America, and I asked my friends because there was clearly like a very poor response to Black community. So like an example is after Hurricane Katrina, there were pictures of like white people taking stuff from stores that have been flooded, right? Food, heaters, televisions, stuff to fix boats and cars so that they can get around. And they say that they're reclaiming property. And then they showed pictures on the news of Black people doing the exact same shit, taking the exact same things, right? And they called it looting. And so that's what kind of motivated, because this is early on. This is about the time like I was starting to get into to leftism. Is I was like there was a natural disaster and it reminded me of Katrina, and so I brought that up to some of my Black friends and I asked them like, not like the question wasn't like, do you consider yourself an American, but the common response when you question their representation in the American government, they'll tell you, I'm an American, I just don't feel like the system represents me. And so yeah, I think that the answer from my perspective would be greater integration into a kind of a colorblind division based on communities and off of population. Right now, if you look down at as small as you can get on an electoral level in the United States is districting, and there's famous instances of gerrymandering where certain minorities will be watered down by like the Republicans who want to overwhelm a Latino majority district. When they win an election, they'll redistrict and they'll kind of split up that Latino district and spread the Latinos out amongst 3 districts that are majority white, or have a bunch of different ethnicities, so that it's just kind of this amalgam of all the colors, and they can reliably get a vote leaning in their direction. And you'll see the opposite with the Democrats, where the Democrats will try and give these people self-determination, or they'll try and split up the rich white Republicans. I don't think that's fair. I think that there should be I think it should be based on community. I think it should be based on population, based on how easily reached the location is. I think that each community should be able to elect a representative if they want a representative. And, and of course you need a representative if you want to have a say in how you're governed. And so that would be my solution to an ethnic-based problem in democracy. It's not about giving them their own district. It's not about giving them their own state. It's about making sure that they, in the area that they live or that they want to live, can be represented in the way that is necessary for them to function in democracy. Does that make sense, or did I just ran coherently for like 5 minutes?
Well, the thing is not that I disagree with that. It's in fact I do agree. It's more like, for me, it's a question of, I can see that sort of sentiment that I was talking about earlier, like a push for a sort of new Africa thing, before I can see like a countrywide socialist revolution. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, if there was a whole like a nationwide socialist revolution, and the Black revolutionaries and the Black community was like, oh, we just want to be better represented and better integrated. I mean, that's great. That's if that like that self-determination. I'm not saying like I'm not saying that me, Mr. non-black person, gets to tell you exactly what you want.
Yeah.
Like what is the general consensus among the revolutionaries from that community? Do they want integration into this project, or do they want self-determination, which they totally deserve if they do?
Yeah.
And in fact, they have more of a right to that than the settler whites do, to be honest. It's just more like a if than a they have to. You know what I'm saying? Like if this is something that, because I see that I can genuinely like a bunch of like the material conditions in this country leading to a bunch of like sort of Malcolm X characters.
Right.
Malcolm X is really cool. I love that guy, but like a bunch of like new like sort of Malcolm X-esque characters kind of like gaining prominence. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's and if they and on maybe and part of that a movement of that sort might be a fight to like gain your own like sort of autonomous region or whatever. But I don't know. It's mostly speculation. So I don't actually disagree with you.
Right. No.
I mean, it's just more of a like I just see that happening. Yeah. So we're gonna like, if there is such a thing, though, like if there's like if the indigenous people and the who really have main right to the land and like the black community, if they are willing to, if this is a project that the general consensus among these communities that this is like a worthwhile thing, we're gonna call it American Socialist States, and anybody who makes fun of the acronym or the is that the right acronym? Like anyone who makes fun of the
whole
American
USSA or the
no American Socialist States, and anyone who makes fun of the acronym
I gotcha.
gets put in a that's how we decide who gets put in the labor camps in Alaska, because we don't have Siberia. We're gonna use Alaska.
I can't. I've been working for a while. Like every time I think of like the USSA type of thing, it's like I keep trying to come up with an American version of the gulags, and like honestly, the most relevant example I can come up with is Starbucks, because they are basically like, I don't know. They're an extremely populous labor camp. That's all that they really are. Oh my god, have you seen their wages? Oh man, they are not a great place to work. Anyway, I don't know. It was just
I was at Starbucks the other day and I felt really bad for this guy who was like taking my order and like having trouble with the machine, and like I just felt so bad for him, because like I was like, I've been new at a job before, and like everyone was like yelling at him like, yo, take the guy's order. And like,
oh my god.
I felt bad, but like it was clearly like his first week or something, or like his first day, or I don't even know.
Yeah. I saw a thing where and this made me happy for a split second, but then like I remembered, oh yeah, we live in a capitalist society, and I looked deeper into it, and I found out that it was exactly what I suspected it was. But where now for students on that use financial aid to get through school, if you work for Starbucks, you get basically partial tuition payment from Starbucks if you're going to ASU. And for one thing, like ASU is not a great school at all, but it's
Is this Arizona State or something, or?
Yeah, Arizona State University. It's a famously cheap,
I know nothing about it, so.
It's a diploma mill. Kind
of. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's super cheap. It's online, and it's basically
Phoenix University.
Yeah, it's
Don't fry.
I looked into it, and it turns out the whole thing is basically just a huge tax break, and plus you're guaranteeing business or cheap labor. You're guaranteeing business to ASU, and you're guaranteeing cheap labor to Starbucks, who pay they pay virtually no full-time employees, and they pay like $9 an hour to their highest paid hourly employees, and it's criminal. But that's me as a leftist.
Karl Marx thinky emoji.
was so um before we move on, I wanted to say, have you read or have you heard of Thomas More?
I have heard of Thomas More.
He was
I
a
have not really. Is this? Oh, is this the Utopia guy?
yeah.
I haven't really had a chance to really sit down and read Utopia, but isn't it sort of like socialistic
It
in
it
a
is
way?
it is, and people can't really decide. It's from, I want to say, the early 1500s. But it's
Yeah, he was 1500s.
yeah, it was somewhere in that ballpark, and people can't really tell if it's satirical or if it's like if he's being serious. But either way, it has a very pro-worker vibe, and it refers to like people governing themselves. Um, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
I haven't read it either, but I've read like how do you say this? I've read like excerpts from it, and I've read about it, and I've read articles on it. Um, but it basically, um, in it, there are societies based on, how do you say this? Like on rationalism. Like uh, they lean heavily towards the rejection of private property. There's personal property, but like everyone still owns everything.
Uh-huh.
And these societies are successful, and they don't use currency, and everyone is basically the same. Um, and it is basically, this is like Karl Marx's wet dream in the Middle Ages, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know, it's I don't know, it's just this gorgeous thing to me, and it kind of validated me we've been using that word a lot in this episode, but it made me feel good. It made me feel more confident, to think that there was someone like this long ago who was like, hey, what if we didn't have money and like gave people what they needed? Don't you think that would work out better? And I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, well, socialism and communism, I mean, the idea existed before Karl Marx, that Marx and Engels
Yeah,
started the whole thing of scientific socialism, you know?
yeah,
Like, I mean, even like, you could even like, I'm sure you could find, if we had more access to records and stuff, I'm sure we could find ancient Greek people talking about like society in which, or like talking about like, arguing against private property rights or
oh yeah,
something like,
yeah. I think
um,
I think Plato, I want to say it was Plato, described a society in the Republic where basically everyone got everything they needed. The only difference is in his republic, quote unquote, or his ideal government of the aristocracy. Um, the leader was like this person who was bred to be a leader. Anyway, sorry, I
oh yeah.
interrupted you. Um,
Hmm.
sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, no, I, yeah, because Plato was kind of weird on democracy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Thomas More, I was at I think it was the Frick or something, art museum.
What did you call me? Oh, okay, I got you.
Oh yeah, I was at the Frick. That's what it's called. It's like an art museum in New York, and I saw a painting of him. So I was like, that's pretty cool. I know who that is. I haven't actually read any of his stuff, but I definitely know who he is. I'm definitely aware because like my dad is like a professor of political theory,
Oh,
and so basically like political theory and philosophy is like a family business because like his dad was also like a philosophy professor. Like,
you said socialism existed like, before Karl Marx and everything. Yeah, it
mhm.
did, absolutely. There were people like Robert Owen, and there was the Paris Commune was the first experiment, really, I guess, with
Wait,
socialism.
wasn't the Paris Commune though like during the? Hold on.
That was during
What?
the French Revolution. That was 1812.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, and so like
Yeah.
100 years before Marx hit his prime, there were people like Robert Owen, who's I think Robert Owen, either him or his son, went on and attempted to found a commune in America, kind of under the government's nose. Like they didn't really
Hmm.
before, like at this time there wasn't really a stigma against this concept, but
Hmm.
I'm fairly certain it was Robert Owen's son who went and uh, settled a town in Indiana or something like that. But they settled a town, and it started out going great, but eventually, as it started to prosper, more and more people started to settle, and the capitalists moved in, and eventually outnumbered the socialist, quote unquote, the people who were living socialist lives without really calling it socialist, and
Hmm.
capitalism overwhelmed it. Anyway, um, But yeah, so yeah, you were absolutely right. And I just wanted to address that real quick. That yeah, there was socialism before Karl Marx. It was just like Thomas More is like the earliest person I can really find that really gives an embodiment to the concept of like a socialist state, a state in
Yeah.
which um like there is no currency, or in like where everyone gets what they need and there's democracy and the decisions are made collectively.
Mhm.
And that's one for the socialist book club. But
Yeah. Oh,
so
another thing,
yeah.
just quick complaint about people who try to cite like on the subject, people who try to cite like Sparta as an example of like ancient socialism like that. Can I just say that's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard? Like, and also like not to mention, you know, the fact. I mean, I guess maybe this is just me making more Marxist noises, but like not to mention that's like completely like incompatible with like the dialectic and like the wheel of history, whatever. Anyway, sorry, you can keep going. That was silly.
You're good, and I've never heard anyone cite Sparta.
I've heard people do that, and it's like, are you like, wasn't it? I think it was something like slaves outnumbered Spartans like by 7-1 or something crazy like that, like the Helots.
Jeez.
And stuff, and like, I don't know, like, it's just silly. It's some stuff. And I think people also might say that kind of thing about ancient Egypt, which is also kind of dumb because they definitely had like private plots of land and stuff.
And one of the largest slave nations in the
Yeah.
entire world.
That what we call that is slave society, and that's what comes after sort of primitive communism, and then from there, when that fails, blah blah. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Dialectics.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing on the to-do list here. All right. So real quick, let's cover Socialist Reading Club for this week. It's gotten Settlers by Jay Sakai, which is that really socialist reading material, or is that more just like a remark on race culture in America, or like?
No. So I mean, it's mostly like it's. I mean, Sakai is definitely a Marxist. And it's less. I mean, it doesn't really like. It's definitely a work of socialist literature, even though the main. No, in fact, yeah, because it's like literally the mythology of the white proletariat, which I don't agree that's like a complete that there is no such thing as a white proletariat in America, or even in I think he makes the argument that just like also like Western Europe, but like you know what I'm saying, like I don't agree that that's completely accurate, but I think that it's important, and he's right about a lot of things, and despite the fact that it's kind of a meme among leftist circles, read settlers.org,
I actually just had that tab open.
But like readsettlers.org, like just spamming that. But it actually, like on a serious note, it does make important contributions, and I do think that the distinction between the white proletariat and as much as I'd like to say like, oh, we're all one, the human race, which we are, but like there is an important distinction between the level of oppression that the white proletariat faces and that the black proletariat faces in the country. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that he makes a very important contribution to revolutionary politics in general with that work, and I think people should read it, even though I don't agree that the white proletariat is just a complete myth.
Right.
And I don't think really that's entirely his argument. I mean, that's just kind of like he just kind of says that,
Right. It's like who was it we were talking about the other day that didn't necessarily say that he loved Stalin, but like, or didn't say Stalin did nothing wrong, but who was
Wait,
it?
what?
We were talking about the author last time. Who was it that was that heavily defended Stalin? I can almost say his name. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so on the socialist reading list, it's Settlers, Utopia by Thomas More, and I would say basically any of Robert Owen's papers.
Okay.
But yeah, so there we go. I still need to read the first two, but I have read some of Robert Owen's works, and he did.
I have not, so.
It was definitely him that attempted that. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Marxist Space Pod. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like. I hate how generic that made me sound, but so be it. Our schedules have been tight lately, especially mine, and mine's fixing to get a little more strict, but we'll likely keep uploading without a set schedule, so keep an eye out for the next episode. And until then, I hope to see you there.